How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Welcome back to the channel. As you can see behind me here, today starts the Homer series. We've got a lot to do on the car and a little bit of time to get it done. I've made the decision I want to take this car to Cletus & Cars in Bristol, Tennessee on the weekend of September 3rd and 4th. And that is going to be a pretty daunting task. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of work to do. Homer is essentially a bare shell at this point. There's no engine, transmission, there's no rear end, no interior, no wiring, nothing. And I've got about 3 months to get it done. I know that sounds like a lot of time, but keep in mind, I still work a 60-hour-a-week job, which only technically leaves Saturdays and maybe Sundays to work on the car and get videos and content out to you all. So I think that narrows it down to about 24 days I've got to build this car completely. So the only way to make that happen is to get after it. One piece at a time, just keep moving forward. So I realized before I could put the engine back in the car, I've got a lot of housekeeping to do, and I'll flip you around and show you what that is here in a minute. For those of you who are new to the channel and unfamiliar with Homer, he's a 1976 Chrysler Cordoba. If you look down here in the playlist, I think there's 7 or 8 videos, kind of like just redoing the front end, getting the Willwood brakes put on, cleaning up the cradle, and getting all that nonsense taken care of. So now we're back to the fun stuff, which was putting it back. We're gonna get the engine put back in, get the transmission put back in, start working our way up to the dual superchargers. If you watched from the earlier videos, I had a very specific list of companies that I wanted to work with. Hughes converters, Torque Storm superchargers, Willwood brakes, QA1 suspension, energy suspension components. Very specific list. And I've reached out to every one of those, and it looks like we're gonna be able to use all those companies that are gonna come in and help us with the car as far as supplying parts. Now, none of them are sponsors yet. If they're interested in being sponsors for the car, anybody's interested in being a sponsor for the car, reach out to us at bustedradiogarage@gmail.com. Send me an email, we'll go from there. If you haven't done it yet, there's a little icon floating around down here. Go ahead and click it and you can subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free to do so. And you can stay in touch on what we're gonna do with Homer. Now the plan is to have one video for you every Saturday up till the weekend of the September 3rd and 4th, which will be the last video of this series, which will be Homer in the burnout pit in Bristol. Now, I'm not gonna do Homer like I've done the Junkyard Dog. I'm not gonna go out there and intentionally just beat the crap out of the car. That was my intention for the Junkyard Dog. Unfortunately, we got shut down early. Homer's not gonna be treated that way. If we hit the wall, we hit the wall. At the end of the day, we're gonna have a reinforced cage around the rear end of Homer, kind of like you see in some of the other burnout cars. So if we do wall tap, it doesn't tear up the car. On top of that, Homer's also gonna have a full race cage, because at some point we plan on taking him down the strip. So that's kind of helped to reinforce the car from getting bent back and forth or whatever, tearing up the subframe. So anyway, this is Busted Radio Garage. Let's get after it. All right, guys, like I said before, we've got a lot of housekeeping to do in here first before I can set this engine. I've actually got to get the steering column hooked back up, which I forgot I'd left undone. And if any of you worked on these old Chryslers or Mopars or what have you, the brake lines run up the inside of the frame rail, along the firewall, above the trans tunnel, back over, up the other frame rail, and hook into the soft brake lines here. So I've actually got to get all of that built and mounted to the firewall before I can place the engine. So while I'm doing that, I may as well go ahead and clean up the brake booster, get it repainted, get the new master cylinder put on, the lines down to the proportioning valve, and so on and so forth. So essentially get these brake lines done and out of the way. And then I don't have to worry about it when I place Homer's engine in. So again, for those of you who are new to the channel, even the subscribers that I currently have, and thank you, by the way, some of this video is going to be very technical. And the reason that I'm going to do it that way is there's going to be some younger viewers or even some older viewers that haven't attempted to do this by themselves. So I'm going to show some tricks along the way. Again, my tricks or my way of doing things may not be, as you would say, to the manufacturer's specifications. So as with anybody else, you got to put that disclaimer out there. Just because I'm doing it that way does not mean it's the right way. All right, make sure you follow the manufacturer's recommendations, manufacturer's safety guidelines, all of that good stuff, especially when it comes to brakes. All right, Homer for now is not going to have rear brakes. He's going to be used as a burnout car initially. So I'm just going to set him up with front brakes only. Again, I will not show you how to do that. I'm not going to be responsible for somebody getting out there unfamiliar with the doing and he hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. So I will show you how to hook up the front brakes. We'll get all that built, master cylinder put on, get the booster painted, and then we'll set Homer's engine in, and if we got enough time, I'll go ahead and get the torque converter mounted to Homer's built transmission here. And here's one of the companies that was on my original list to use, and that was Hughes Converters. I actually got him on my car. Top-notch quality product over there for them guys. So that's what we'll continue to use. I have a feeling that as we build this engine and more horsepower, you know, we're gonna have to upgrade to a different torque converter, but for now, that's gonna work, I believe. So that's enough yapping. I'm gonna set up the camera. We're gonna go ahead and get these brake lines ready to go. And I'll show you how I do that as far as running new. I've actually got it here. I use copper for the brake lines. Now I understand that Homer's not gonna be out on the road in the salt and the snow. I could probably get away with steel, but let's just be honest with you. The copper is a lot easier to work with. And we're using 3/16 brake line. Here's the, I'll slow this down for a minute so you can read it. It's 25-foot roll of 3/16 copper brake line. You can get any O'Reilly's or auto parts store, what have you. Now keep in mind, it is extremely expensive. I'm trying to do this build as if you or me, just a common blue collar working guy who's feeding his family and trying to pay his bills, but yet again wants to have some toys to play with. So again, I don't have these big huge corporate sponsors or other builders doing my work for me and so on and so forth. I'm doing this myself. And so I'm trying to keep the price down, essentially is what I'm saying. But anyway, this was $60 for 25 feet, which I don't think was too awful bad. The fittings are a couple dollars a piece, which isn't really that bad. And obviously we're gonna flare everything, and I'll show you how I do that here. Aside from that, let's just get after it, and we'll see what happens. All right, got the steering shaft hooked back up to the steering column, so we're going to go ahead and give this brake booster a makeover so it looks at least somewhat decent with the rest of everything else under the hood. And then we'll go ahead and put the master cylinder on and start running our brake lines. Much better. All right, hang tight, guys. We'll go ahead and get this master cylinder hooked up real quick. All right, guys, like I said earlier, I got the brake booster all painted and cleaned up, so at least it looks kind of like everything else underneath here. Here's Homer's original or new master cylinder that I had bought a few months back to put on here. And what I've done is, if you look back in the playlist and some of the other videos, you'll see where all I did was cleaned it up and clear coated it to keep it from rusting. And it's, I mean, it looks just like the day I bought it. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount this back on here and get ready for the brake lines. And some of you are probably asking, well, why am I not going with the Willwood master cylinder and proportioning valve setup? Like I said in the beginning of this video, I'm trying to do this with some sort of budget in mind, right? Because not everybody can just go and buy an entire setup all at once and put it on their car. You add a piece at a time. So this master cylinder isn't going to know what style of calipers it's pushing the fluid to. It's not going to care. It's going to push the fluid to the calipers, whether it's Willwood or whether it's factory brakes. So over time, we'll add new stuff on here just like anybody else would. Now, if Will wanted to set an entire setup out here for Homer, yeah, I'd put it on. But the average guy or the average gal or the average person is going to build a piece at a time and just keep upgrading their system, right? They're not just going to go and dump $100,000 all at once. So we'll go ahead and get this mounted up and we'll start running our brake lines, get that buttoned up, and then we'll get ready to put the engine in the car. Ain't try to say. All right, guys, we're actually getting ready to start the brakes. All of that is ready to go now. Now this is where Junkyard Dog comes in importance rather. When I was doing all this work on Junkyard Dog, getting ready for Cletus and cars right before I destroyed it, people were wondering why I was spending so much money on a car that I was just going to destroy. And I said during the building of the car that a lot of the parts are going to be used on Homer, so it really didn't matter. So when I was doing Junkyard Dog, master cylinder, proportioning valve, brake lines, and all of that for this section all the way down to the calipers, pads and all, are brand new. Now the calipers and the pads and all that I'm not going to use on Homer because he has well-wood brakes. But if I'm right, which I think I am, these calipers and pads will work on the F-body Mopars, and I have a few of those. So those calipers and pads I'll just put back in the box, and any of those F-body Mopars, the Aspens, Valaris, Sunrunners, I mean, my God, they made 100 packages of them. If any of those cars of mine need calipers or pads, well, I've got them. So it's essentially not a waste of money. Now back to Homer, I'm gonna take these new brake lines, proportioning valve and what have you, off of Junkyard Dog, which are still new. Now I'm gonna run them right over there and I'm gonna put them on Homer. So essentially, I have the parts here. I'm not gonna need to spend any more money. And I killed two birds with one stone with that. So that was my thinking on that. So I kind of, if it helps answer any questions, well, there you go. So the master cylinder we're going to leave on here. I don't need it. But the proportioning valve and the brake lines that come off the master cylinder for the proportioning valve, I do need. So I'm going to go ahead and jerk those off there real quick. I'm going to run them over here, put them on Homer, and then I'll have an idea where I need to run our new brake lines, right? And then that section of it's going to be done. And then we should be able to go ahead and place the engine in here, get that all bolted in, and then depending on time, we may be able to go ahead and mount the transmission in. And then the real fun begins. We're going to be able to start adding, you know, radiator and superchargers and pulleys, and we're going to have to get the inner wheel fender or inner wheel tubs put in, get those mounted up. Because the proportioning valve is going to have to mount to that. And then we'll just kind of go from there. So it's just going to be a piece at a time, a little bit at a time. But if we keep moving forward, we're going to be fine. So hang tight a minute. I'm going to go over there and take that off the Junkyard Dog. We'll bring it over here, put it on Homer, and we'll start running our new brake lines. Hang tight. All right, guys, I got the proportioning valve and lines in. It was off the master cylinder on Homer, or on the Junkyard Dog, sorry. So it bolted in just like I figured it would. I'll go ahead and explain to you what the proportioning valve is real quick here. So on this setup here for Chrysler, what you have are your two main feed lines that come in off your master cylinder and feed into the front and rear ports of the proportioning valve. This little nipple here in the center is a plug-in for an idiot light inside the car, or a dummy light that shows you if you have a brake problem. It'd be like the brake light, right? So this front port here is for the front brake line on the driver's side. This port here on the bottom is for the front brake line on the passenger side. This section here, this valve section, comes down and runs along the frame rail and will go to the back of the car. And any of you have ever seen it where it comes to the back of the car, usually goes up on the rear axle, it'll split off into a T and go to the driver and passenger side rear brakes, whether they're disc or drum brakes or whatever. Now what the proportioning valve does is, if let's say you're driving down the road and you hit your brakes and it, let's say you break a brake line on your rear brakes or on your driver's side rear, whatever. There's a valve in here that'll click and shift and block that section off temporarily to allow you enough time to stop and to give the proper fluid to either the front or the rear, whichever ones are still good. And then that kicks off this sensor, which sets off something in the car that says, hey, look, I got something going on with my brakes. And generally you're gonna feel it in your pedal instantly. If you've ever been driving and you've had a brake line bust, I mean, your pedal will just, I mean, it'll just plumb sink. I mean, you'll feel it. You don't want to be in that position, but that's just a nice, it's good for safety, really. It'll help you out or give you just enough time to get stopped safely, and then you can get the car fixed. Eventually, at some point, Homer's going to have rear brakes, because again, we're going to use him in a road course event at some point and go down the track. So I'm going to keep that in there, and then if we go on a drag and drive, obviously I need to have it. So anyway, enough yapping there. So what I'm going to do now is I've got this set up kind of where it's going to sit, because this is going to bolt to the inner fender well here at some point. So we'll just kind of leave it hanging there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the passenger side first. I'm going to get my brake line built up off. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go back like the factory did. They went up, over, and under, and all this down and around. I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to come up, ride the frame rail, come up through the connectors on the firewall, and then just let it stub off to the side over here for now. And I'll do the same thing on the driver's side, bring it over, because it's going to have to come, up, over, along the frame rail, up, over, and into the proportioning valve here. So I think I'm just going to kind of get everything stubbed up here and out of the way for now. And then once I get the inner fender well in, I'll be able to put everything in, kind of run it nice and tight against the fender well, and then into the proportioning valve. And then ultimately into the master cylinder. Mainly I just want to get these run, and mainly for the firewall really, and get that section done so I can get this engine put in here. But I know there's a lot of talking, a lot of yapping, but if this helps somebody, that's what it's all about. That's the reason I started this channel. Even with that little goofy lawnmower video that I done, I mean, I can't tell you the thank yous I've got from people that are in a position where they need a hand. So if this seems too technical, you can always kind of skip through and just see the highlights. I'd rather you not. It hurts their algorithm that way, but hey, it is what it is. So let me get started on this and we'll go from there. Hang tight a second. All right, guys, we're getting ready to start running the new copper lines, brake lines, 3/16, and it comes in a roll about 25 foot long, okay? Now what I like about copper is it's super malleable. I mean, I just pulling off what I need, and you just kind of pull and you can get it fairly straight, okay? Now what I like to do is run my long sections first. So I'm gonna need a big hoop from the passenger side along the firewall over to the proportioning valve, okay? So what I wanna do is just leave it connected, and I'm just gonna take through the car and fish it through these grommets that are already in the firewall. Kind of like so, okay? Now you can move this stuff around. Don't freak out that like every move you're gonna make is gonna create a kink. You know, just take your time and you'll be able to fish it to wherever it needs to go. And then when we go to start making our bends, there's multiple ways to do that. If you need a smaller, you can use sockets. You can use the special brake tools they have. It's almost like I got one over there. You put your brake line in and it's a bender that kind of bends it in a nice round area, if you will. But essentially, the smaller or the tighter the turn you need is the smaller the surface you need. So get a smaller socket for a smaller turn, or a tighter turn, or something a little bit bigger around a piece of pipe. Anything that's hard and round, you can mold this brake line around to get it to where you need it to be. So do not be intimidated by it. It's not that big a deal, really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and feed my main hoop first, and I'm going to let it dangle over there probably 2 or 3 feet. I'd rather have a little too much than not enough. And then I'm going to get a socket or whatever, because I might have to turn down to match the contour of the firewall. And then I'm going to have to turn back up to match the contour of the frame rail. And then again, I'm going to have to make 2 more turns. I'm going to have to turn towards the brake line and then run like a 45-degree turn down the end toward, then I'm gonna have to put my fitting on and make my flare. Now before you make your flare, make sure you always have your fittings on, because that is a bummer. If you get it cut to the exact size you need, you make your flare and then you don't have a fitting on. So not only then are you cutting again, obviously your material is not going to be long enough now, and then you're essentially fiddle farting around just trying to make something work with compression fittings or whatever. I'm not totally against compression fittings, to be honest. They do not recommend it, I believe. So again, follow manufacturer's recommendations, but I have used them in the past with no problem. So, all right, enough yapping. I'm just going to go ahead and fish this through and start trying to get hooked up to my passenger side brake line, soft line rather, and then we'll start over on the driver's side. And again, you can kind of move this around a little bit. Just be kind of careful. Again, these fittings that are mounted to these firewalls will open. You just need a flathead screwdriver, kind of like this, or other routes. If you've got just a beautiful, immaculate show car, pristine paint job, then yeah, you're going to take more precaution. This is a burnout car. Granted, I put some time into welding and painting all this and making it look nice, but I'm not super particular about it. So you just take and you bend that open a little bit more, and it gives you just a little bit more room to move your brake line around. But again, I'm just going to keep on feeding. Well, like I was saying, guys, yeah, you're just going to gradually feed it through. There, that one popped into place. Now our next one's a pretty severe turn, so it's going to dive down. There's a clip over there underneath the steering column or steering shaft, whatever. So once I get this fed over, well, I'll have to go over and kind of just baby it down until we can get it, and then we're going to have a hard turn over to the proportioning valve. I'm not going to worry about that right now because I'm going to get some new fittings, but again, I'm just going to let it stub out a couple of feet so I do have the material there to work with. So once I get over where I'm at and I'm happy with it, we're going to go ahead and turn down and follow the frame rail. Let's see if I can get this girl to open up a little bit more for me. There we go. All right. So it went ahead and dove down for me, which is perfect. Little bugger keeps wanting to pop out of that clip, which is fine. I'll go ahead and get her locked in there and get her tapped back in place. Okay, that'll hold that there for now. Go over here and pull this through. I'll spin you around. I don't know if you can see this or not, but I've got another clip. Actually, it's got me going over. So here's my other clip here for the brake line. It's actually got me going over the steering shaft. So what I'll do is I'll back this back up. Oop, don't want to get a kink. Okay, and I'm gonna get inside there and I'll feed it through here. And then we'll be able to come straight down, turn and follow the frame rail up to the proportioning valve, because this here is going to control the passenger side. So again, I'm just going to run this out here to about here and leave it for now and focus on the other side, and then when I get some new fittings, we'll bend this into place. All right, hang tight a minute, let me get this done, and then I'll be back with you and we'll hook up the passenger side hard line to the soft line. All right, guys, I've got everything set up on the firewall through the other end over there like I told you I was going to do. So now we're at the point where we got to start making turns down. I've got an old socket here that it's actually got a bolt wedged in it, and I'm just too lazy to get out of there. So I don't know if you can see, but I've got, I don't know, 7 or 8 foot of additional brake line just kind of strung out here. That way I've got room to mess with, room to play with, because again, you always want to have a little bit more than not enough. So I'm gonna get this spun down here towards the frame rail, try to hug the body line as much as I can, and then I'm gonna start running it up the frame rail over here to my soft line. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use this socket and this copper brake line and just roll it over. Now this stuff's pretty malleable. I could probably actually do it without the socket, but to get a nice round roll, I'm just gonna go ahead and use this. I'm hoping you can see this, but essentially all I'm gonna do is get down here, take my socket roughly where I want my bend, which is here, and just get a good hold on it. And I'm just gonna roll it right around the socket. Okay, see how that's turned down now? Following the body line. Now I'm getting to the point where I'm gonna need this bottom section to turn as well. So I'm gonna take my socket, put it down here roughly where I think it's gonna roll, and I'm just gonna roll that line right around the socket as well. And just create a nice little S-turn, just like so. So we went from that shooting out straight on out here into the shop. Now we've got it following the body line down, and I'm lined up pretty well with my frame rail here. So now what I gotta do is I gotta go against that curve, right? So now I've gotta get it to turn and come this way. So essentially what I'm gonna do is just do the same thing. I'm gonna put my socket here, and I'm just gonna roll that copper around, and once I get it to where it's spun, I can kind of measure off what I'm gonna need. I'll add probably a foot to that, and then I'll cut it off, and I'll be able to get everything kind of here where it's workable, and then I'll be able to roll it right over into the soft line, and we have no kinks, and it actually looks pretty decent there. It doesn't look bad. So if I really wanted to be picky about it, I could probably roll it up underneath the bottom of the firewall and then turn it really sharp and come up. But I mean, I'm not gonna be that picky about it. You're never gonna see it anyway, because by the time we get the engine in here, the headers in here, the superchargers in here, I mean, all that stuff piled up in here, you're not gonna be able really to see anything back here. So nevertheless, let me go ahead and get this start turned this way. We'll cut off what we need. We'll get it over here hooked to the soft line. And then once I get the new fittings over there for the proportioning valve, we'll hook that section up. Not gonna be that big a deal. But at that point, we're gonna be able to go ahead and see if we can get that engine to set in here. Again, there's still that little bit of concern with the oil pan, but I think it's gonna fit just fine. That's my own fault. I wanted a nice deep sump pan. You know, so we've got plenty of oil to the engine when we're out acting ignorant in it. So, all right, cool, let's get going. So I'm gonna just hop back down in here, and I'm just gonna start rolling this brake line, essentially towards you guys, really, towards the camera. So I'm gonna just start, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm just gonna start kind of like here at the base of the firewall, and I'm gonna push the socket towards the brake line and just take my fingers and just start rolling that brake line towards you, really, towards the camera. And just let the socket do the work. Okay, so we got a nice turn there. Started this way. So I'm gonna kind of get a tape measure, which, I don't know, I could probably spitball off 3 feet, but I don't want to be too short. See what we need here. So from there, we're about 2 foot to the soft line. So again, I'm gonna go a little bit longer. I'm gonna go 3 foot. I'd rather have too much and not enough. So you get a cutter. Now, any of you guys that ever watched my videos before know that I do not, and I repeat, do not spend money on high-end tools like Snap-on, Mecco, any of that. It's just, I've never seen it to be, there's no value there for me, right? I could go to Harbor Freight where I get 99% of my tools. And if I get a year or so out of it and it breaks, I mean, it's, you know, I'm not out anything. I got 2 years out of it. But anyway, back to this. You can get this at Harbor Freight. These things are handier in the shirt pocket. It's just a little tubing cutter. Generally plumbers or electricians or whatever use them to cut copper pipe or conduit or whatever. And they're perfect for this brake line because if you're making a repair, you can get this thing virtually anywhere. You know, up against the frame rail, up in the engine bay or whatever, and it's not in your way. It doesn't have that big handle at the end, you know. So, all right, let me cut off about 3 foot of this. We'll get this spun around and we'll go from there. Hang tight a second. All right, guys, I got roughly my 3 foot cut off dangling here. Now that I've got my tube bends down and then my brake line heading the direction I want, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna leave that bend still, and I'm just gonna work this pipe over by hand. Because again, this stuff's pretty malleable. You can kind of get it going in the direction you want without creating a whole lot of problem. And what I wanted to do to see is just that right there. I just kind of wanted it to tuck underneath the control arms. And what I'll end up doing is I'll get some like rubber fuel line or something that's pretty thin walled, and I'll probably put it over the brake line in this area. Let me turn this down so you can see. I think y'all will be able to see a little bit better like that. But I'll put it over this right here in this area just to kind of prevent any rubbing, which I don't think it's going to. But that there is exactly where it needs to be. So, let me get this off here so I can show you. So now I've got it run up along the frame rail. Now all I've got to do is put my turn in here, have it come over, make my flare, and attach it right to the soft line, and we're done. So, not too bad. Not too bad. I'm happy with it. We'll have brakes over to the front over here now. That's gonna be the end of it. And again, just a socket. I've got the actual tool here somewhere. I dug it out to show you. I think this was actually purchased at Harbor Freight as well. It goes 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8, all the way down to 3/16. But this is just a brake line bending tool. And they're cool, I've used them before, but they are a booger to get into a tight spot. So if you're up under here trying to get this to bend around the frame rail, yeah, it'll work, but they're a little tight. I mean, it's an awful big tool, you know, to try to be doing tight work with. But anyway, yeah, if you're interested in that, I think that's the part number from up there at Harbor Freight. Oh, you know what? This wasn't Harbor Freight. I lied to you. I actually purchased this at AutoZone. I think, I can't remember what car I bought this for. I was doing something, but no, I lied to you. This is not a Harbor Freight tool. It is an AutoZone tool. That is my fault. Harbor Freight didn't have any that day. But anyway, there's the part number. There's the name. If that's something you want to go look into for yourself. All right, well, I'm going to get back to it. I'm going to go ahead and get this turned. We'll get a flare made, get our fitting put on, and we'll attach this side. We'll get this engine bay cleaned up a little bit, and we're going to try to get this motor set down in here. And I'll get some fittings hunted up for that proportioning valve, and we'll get that hooked up over there. Shouldn't take 10 minutes. And but my main thing is I want to get the engine put in here today and see what it looks like. And then if time allows, we'll go ahead and get the converter from Hughes mounted to the transmission, and see if we can maybe get that mounted today. We'll see. If not, it'll be in technically part 2 of the build series, but part 9 of the overall series. But all right, hold on a second. All right, guys, we got the hard line set into the soft line now. That's all tightened up. Runs all the frame rail of the firewall on over to the proportioning valve. Well, it's going to be hooked up to the proportioning valve anyway. I went ahead and done this flare off camera, and the reason being is when I go to hook all this up, I'm going to need to make 3 or 4 different flares. So I figured if those of you that are wondering how to make a flare or just curious if there's a right and a wrong way, and there is a right and a wrong way, we'll show you that in the next video or two. But I just do mine again with simple tools. This is just an O'Reilly's flare tool, manual tool. You know, there's all your measurements on what brake line to use or what line to flare. Rather, you can flare just about anything. But I'll show you how I do mine in the next video or two when we get that section hooked up. But at least we got the passenger side already run along the firewall, and that was the main purpose of doing that today, so we can get the engine put in. Now I've got it moved over here to in front of Homer. I've got to install the flex plate and the motor mounts. And then we'll go ahead, I'll get my wife and my granddaughter, who you've seen in pretty much every video I have here. We work this shop together, to be honest. Get them in here and have them help me get this set in place. And we'll go from there. So I'll get this engine bay all wiped back out and clean from my big feet. In and out, in and out. And all right. So let me get the flex plate. We got a new flex plate, externally balanced plate from TCI. We'll get that mounted up to the engine. I'll have to get the torque wrench out for that because I think the bolts for that are recommended at 50 pounds. So we'll do that at like 20, 20, 10, probably in different increments. And all the hardware that I'm using for Homer is ARP hardware. I highly recommend, if you're doing anything like this, you go with ARP. I've actually, like with a lot of the people that I use, I'm running their information on the back of Homer. You know, like Hughes converters, you know, comp springs, race quip, ARP VP, QA1, Willwood brakes, so on and so forth, B&M shifter. And these just aren't like some of these guys, though, you know, they get 5 horsepower sticker, you know, they just throw whatever on their car. That's not the case. If it's not going on my car unless I believe in your product. So those of you that are watching this, or be in the description or on Instagram or whatever, I appreciate all your products we're using for the car. So nevertheless, let me get the flex plate mounted to the engine, and then motor mounts, and then we'll get to putting this old girl in the car. All right, guys, got the engine over here in front of Homer. Went ahead and go ahead and put the motor mounts on. That's just 6 bolts. Didn't think you'd really want to be watching that. But anyway, so got the flex plate set on here. And I've got these 6 bolts on here from ARP. Just make sure you use this assembly lubricant they give you for the threads. But anyway, they're calling for 75 foot-pounds of torque on each one of the bolts. And the way I do mine is kind of like you do when you're putting a wheel and a tire on a car. I just, every other one, till you get them all snug. So every other one, kind of like you would if you're putting a tire on a car. We got everything set at 75 foot-pounds. So now we're gonna go ahead and get everything spun around, try to set this in the car. Hang tight. All right, boys and girls, she is back in there. Got her bolted back in. Went ahead and pulled the valve covers back off. I wanted to just take a look at everything real quick. I want to order a nice set of valve covers for it, but I kind of need to see where the placement's going to be for the superchargers. I'm going to go ahead and leave the engine hoist hook to it for tonight. Tomorrow, if I get time, I'll start recording next Saturday's episode again. I'm going to release one every Saturday for the build portion of Homer, all the way up to Bristol, Cleetus and Cars. So we'll get the trans put in, get all that hooked up, and then we'll just start really focusing on the fun stuff. Headers, valve covers, the front pulley kit, the coil case radiator, inner fender wells, superchargers, all the computer crap, all of that. But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. It's been a good day. It's been cool. If you haven't done it already, somewhere floating around down here is a little subscription icon. Go ahead and hit that for me. Make sure to follow us on all our platforms. We're on Instagram, Facebook, even started one of them TikToks, just putting a little shorts and whatever on there for people. That's actually doing fairly well, to be honest with you. But, and just remember, we're always giving away stickers. They're 100% free. I even ship them to you. If you want one of our little Busted Radio Garage stickers, like 3x6, just shoot over an email to bustedradiogarage@gmail.com with your address, and I'll shoot you over as many as you need, 2, 3, what have you. And that'll be it for that. If you're interested in a shirt or a hat, there's a video on my playlist right now, show you how to get those until the website is finally up. That's just been a nightmare. As far as the junkyard dog goes, he is officially being parted out. I've put out some feelers on some of the Facebook pages, some people asking about him. So from the transmission back, I'm keeping. The engine, I couldn't care less. I mean, I'll keep it for spare if somebody's looking for an actual Magnum 360. Completely, everything is 100% there. Shoot me an email over at bustedradiogarage@gmail.com. We can talk about it. As far as the interior goes, front seats are roached. Back seat, if I'm being honest with you, a little bit of cleaning, that could look like brand new, seriously. Everything is there that came with the car. It's just old. So I don't know how much effort somebody's going to want to take into repairing some of this stuff, but it is all for sale. Everything on the car is for sale. So if you're interested in any of it, bustedradiogarage@gmail.com. We can talk about it. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be the end of this episode. I appreciate y'all watching. I appreciate y'all subscribing. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.